The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering weekly lesson programs for kids, teens, and adults at every skill level. Registration available at skisundown.com. Winter made better.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, space is a vacuum and there is no sound, despite the many explosions and John Williams soundtracks you may have heard in Star Wars.
So Earthbound soundtracks must be created to accompany the real-life images we get from the International Space Station. And we'll meet a Valley-based musician who has been creating soundtracks for the Earthscapes collected from the ISS. Steve Thomas.
And who better to join the conversation than a former resident of the International Space Station, who is a musician herself, Shelburne Falls' own Cady Coleman.
But first, the end is near, so take a break. The end of the Biden administration, at least very.
Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Congressman Jim McGovern. McGoverning with McGovern. Let's begin at the end, I guess. It is the end of the Biden presidency, and yesterday, President Biden gave his farewell address, hearkening to the Republican former General President Dwight Eisenhower, who warned in 1961 of a military-industrial complex. President Biden yesterday warned of a tech-industrial complex. He also warned about threats to democracy. What was your take on the farewell address by President Biden yesterday, Congressman?
Well, I thought it was a good speech, and I think history will look back on the Biden presidency mostly in a positive way. I mean, the accomplishments of getting us out of COVID, the investments in infrastructure, the largest since the creation of the interstate highway system, the historic investments to combat climate change. I think his decency and his character. I didn't agree with everything Biden did. I mean, we had some strong disagreements, but overall, I think he's been a decent president, and he's a good man. I'm glad he raised the issue of our democracy and kind of this tech monopoly and this creation of an oligarchy kind of running our government. You know, you mentioned Dwight Eisenhower, who warned about the military-industrial complex. We didn't listen. The military-industrial complex is out of control. I mean, our defense budget, military budget is so outrageous that even Dr. Strangelove is impressed. I mean, the question is whether we listen. I don't know about you, but I mean, look around at all of his nominees. They're all millionaires and billionaires. I mean, I don't think any of them have ever been into a grocery store. I don't think they ever have had to worry about meeting their expenses at the end of each month. But they're the people who are going to be in the positions of power that are going to make decisions that are going to impact average people. And the idea that, you know, all these tech giants like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg are all genuflecting at the Trump altar, trying, you know, to win his favor. By the way, not to help anybody other than themselves and to make more money. These are the people that are kind of in the inner circle, I think should be of concern. And President Biden said, I love this country. I know you do too. That's a message to us that we have a responsibility here and we can't be asleep at the switch.
In another late-term move by President Biden, yesterday there was a big announcement of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Now, as things have continued on throughout the course of yesterday and today, it seems another 72 Palestinians were killed overnight.
Right.
Netanyahu's cabinet seems to be delaying this. It is something that the Biden administration has been working on since May. It's essentially the same deal as back then.
Right.
It would be
same
a hostage.
deal since May.
And yet, very late in the game, Donald Trump also taking credit for trying to broker this deal. There's some journalists out there saying that the Trump effect and not knowing how Trump will respond, he doesn't have a clear, logical, linear path that people can divine, that it felt like a good time to say yes to this deal, despite the fact that it's been on the table from the Biden administration since May. What's your take on this potential ceasefire between Hamas and Israel?
Yeah. I appreciate the Biden administration negotiating the details. I also appreciate them bringing in the Trump people at the end because, quite frankly, the Trump administration is going to have to implement it. And so that made sense. I mean, that's something Trump would never do if the shoes were on a different foot. But Biden did the right thing, and I praise him for that. But this is a deal, as you pointed out. This is the same deal that could have been achieved in May. Think of all the people that have been killed between May and now. think of all the hostages that have been killed since May and now. And we're hearing Netanyahu's kind of dragging his feet because the right wing in his cabinet are objecting. I mean, the right wing are not interested in getting the hostages back. They're interested in obliterating all of Gaza. I think it's important that Biden came out forcefully and announced this deal. Yesterday, I think other countries around the world have come out forcefully in support of this deal. I think it increases the pressure on Netanyahu to say yes. And if all goes well, then on Sunday, there will be a ceasefire and then humanitarian aid can get into Gaza because people are dying there, not just because of the bombs, but because of starvation and lack of medical supplies. And these hostages, including Israeli and American hostages, can be released. It's all very, very tenuous. I think what's missing in this agreement is that there's no specificity about, are we talking about a two-state solution? What do the borders look like? What are the conditions? Who's got all that kind of stuff? That will have to be worked out in the weeks and the months ahead. But we need to begin with the ceasefire. And let's hope and pray that Netanyahu doesn't walk away from this. He's blaming Hamas for reneging on some of the deal. I put a call through my friend at the State Department this morning to say, what is he referring to? And they have no idea. Mm-hmm. So this really is about Netanyahu under pressure from the right wing and worried that his government will collapse so that, he will be ousted from power.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern, another late last-minute decision from the Biden administration that I think is of particular interest to you. This comes from the publication Semaphore. Biden relaxes restrictions on Cuba ahead of Trump inauguration. The U.S. president will remove Cuba from the list of state-sponsored terrorism just days before President-elect Trump takes office. It was a deal facilitated by the Catholic Church. Now, when President Obama took Cuba off the list of state-sponsored terrorists, eventually Donald Trump puts them back on that list. But it was Joe Biden who personally called you to tell you that news. You were then part of a big junket that went to Cuba to try to announce more of the normalization. Why would he do something so late in his presidency that almost assuredly Donald Trump is going to overturn within days of taking back the Oval Office?
Well, when Biden became president, even before he became president, I had sent him a message and I had talked to him about taking Cuba off the terrorist list. This was before he was even sworn into office. He should have done it then. Cuba was put on the terrorist list at the last minute by Donald Trump. There was no basis to put them on that list, and they should have been removed immediately. And many of us, myself, former Congresswoman Barbara Lee, have been unrelenting in pushing them on this over and over and over again. We are starving people on the island of Cuba because of having them on the terrorist list. They are unable to get assistance from not just us, but from other countries around the world. And he took them off. I'm glad he took them off. There's going to be some prisoners that are going to be released. That's all very positive. But Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of State, and he's indicated that they belong on the list. The worry is that they'll be put right back on. Look, the terrorist list has some very specific criteria. And if you meet that criteria, you should be on the list. Cuba doesn't meet any of the criteria. And the fact that you are playing politics with the terrorist list diminishes its impact when countries do deserve to be on that list. But look at our policy toward Cuba is a outdated, ineffective, cruel throwback to the Cold War. And we need a more mature policy, one in which we improve our relationship, and two, one in which we can promote human rights, and three, one in which we can promote more stability in Latin America and around the world. And I'm glad they did it. I'm like, what the hell took you so long?
You mentioned Marco Rubio and the Senate confirmation hearings about his potentially becoming the Secretary of State look very likely, especially for Marco Rubio, who's one of the more, let's say, traditional choices for Trump cabinet appointments. There have been other hearings this week with Pete Hegseth for the Secretary of Defense, Pam Bondi, who could be the next Attorney General. What are some of your takeaways from some of these hearings? I know that it is it's a bicameral Congress that we have, and it is the Senate that's in charge of this. Nevertheless, I'm sure you have some thoughts as to some of these hearings and some of these appointees after you have heard from them now on the Senate floor.
Yeah, I think my main impression is how spineless Republican senators are. At the Hegseth hearings, the evidence of his excessive drinking to the point. I mean, there's one report he had like 4 gin and tonics for breakfast. I mean, or he had to be carried out of events. The sexual harassment, the testimonies of bigotry, of racism, of bigotry, of diminishing women. His inability to manage nonprofit agencies that he headed. I mean, that's the guy you want as Secretary of Defense to oversee the biggest bureaucracy in our government. I mean, a guy whose temperament has been questioned over and over and over again. This is the guy who you want to lead the military. You can't find anybody better. I mean, in the Republican, even in the right-wing ranks than him. And I just watched Republican senator after Republican senator just kind of whitewash all this as if it's no big deal. And he got away with not even answering basic questions. And there was no second round of hearings, of questioning. None of it was under oath. The FBI background check wasn't shared with everybody on the committee. I mean, this is serious. This guy's in charge of. He's going to be in charge of our nuclear arsenal. This is who he picks. And Pam Bondi is Attorney General. I guess she's better than Matt Gaetz, but an election denier. I mean, can't even bring herself to say that Biden won the election. I mean, this is the person you want as the chief law enforcement officer. So, Marco Rubio, by contrast, at least is a kind of a more traditionalist choice. I disagree with him on most of his foreign policy. We worked together on Tibet and on legislation to support human rights for the Uyghur community. But again, when you look at his cabinet, almost everybody on the cabinet is a millionaire or a billionaire or a talk show host. And I think, again, I don't think these are the people that are going to understand where my constituents are coming from.
Hopefully, as a talk show host, that doesn't disqualify me in the future, although I'm certainly not a millionaire or a billionaire.
Coming up, more with Congressman Jim McGovern, where he'll answer one of your questions addressing the shelter system controversy in Massachusetts, the potential TikTok ban, and more.
And later, Earth Music Live, a performance at 33 Holly in Northampton, setting video taken from the ISS, the International Space Station, to music created by our guest, Steve Thomas.
With a little first-hand perspective from Shelburne Falls astronaut Cady Coleman.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family-owned and operated complete exterior remodeling business offering windows, siding, gutters, and more. windowworldofwesternma.com.
We're speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern. We have a question from Dr. Laura.
Hey, Monty and Calise. This is Dr. Laura from Sunderland, and I have a question for Mr. McGovern. What is he looking forward to the most, and what is he dreading the most in the coming legislative year? Thank you.
Look, I'm looking forward to trying to get the next 2 years over with as little damage to the things that I care about as possible. We're in damage control mode, and I want to win the House back in 2 years. What I'm dreading is all the unknown, of what he might do. The targeting of vulnerable communities, the cuts in programs like SNAP that will increase hunger in this country. I'm dreading, having to defend those programs, against the Republican majority of the House and the Senate and the White House. I'm dreading, having to do battle with these people over their attempts to undercut the last 60, 70, 80 years of social progress in this country. And they can do real harm. And I think that it's unclear just how far they're going to go, but we have to be prepared for the worst.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, a little bit closer to home, Beacon Hill and the Moore-Healey administration celebrating the halfway point of her first term in office here, but with controversy. The Boston Globe reporting after multiple records requests from the Boston Globe, from the Massachusetts Republican Party, and other media outlets about some serious incidences reported in the Massachusetts shelter system. More than 1,000 serious incidences reported, including drug arrest, domestic violence, and rape. Your colleague in the House of Representatives, Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, saying the cover-up is worse than the crime and that we should know the truth about how our tax dollars are being spent and what challenges the Commonwealth faces. Meanwhile, there is an attempt, it seems, to change some of the right to shelter law in Massachusetts on the state level. What is your take on this controversy with the shelter system in Massachusetts and the controversy with the right to shelter law?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's serious, and I think the governor has said it's serious, and I trust her to deal with it. I mean, I think she's been a good governor. I think Kim Driscoll's been a good lieutenant governor, and the systems that are set up are not perfect, and they need to be improved, and we need to make sure that people are treated in a way that is consistent with our values. And I think that, people should have a right to shelter in Massachusetts and in this country. I mean, what's the alternative? I mean, I give this administration, a lot of credit on a lot of different things, and I've had a good working relationship with this governor. There were things that I might do differently. There were things that I wish they were more transparent and open about, and and I'll leave it up to our distinguished and effective state legislative delegation to demand what needs to be demanded. But from where I sit, we have a very good working relationship with the governor, lieutenant governor.
I'm under no impression that there are any Gen Zers or anything listening to public radio at this time of day right now. However, they may be very disappointed on Sunday when TikTok is all of a sudden banned unless something happens. Senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey, unveiled the Extend the TikTok Deadline Act. What's your take on TikTok, its ban, and this Extend the TikTok Deadline?
Well, I'm one of only two in Massachusetts who voted not to ban TikTok, and I'm glad that my colleagues who voted to ban TikTok now want to extend it. That's not the way we should proceed on this. So I don't know how it all will turn out. I mean, the Supreme Court seems to have said that it can end on Sunday. We'll see what happens, but I don't think we should get in the business of banning things like TikTok. If there are concerns, we ought to work them out. We want more transparency. We ought to insist on that. If there are things that are particularly troublesome, we ought to address them. But banning the entire platform, I think is a mistake. I thought it was when Congress voted to do that. But again, there was only two of us in the House delegation that voted not to ban it.
It seems strange with what is going on with social media writ large, with this potential ban of TikTok, with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, with Mark Zuckerberg saying that there will no longer be fact-checking on Meta. There are people that en masse saying we're going to leave these platforms and go to some other social media. Meanwhile, I've been seeing lately some people saying this is an attempt to break up the virtual communities, some of which are positive and wonderful, that have formed using these platforms. What do you foresee, as you're on one of these congressional tech committees, what do you see is happening here with social media? Is this a tech industrial complex takeover that we should all be very afraid of, or is this just a bump in the road for what the future of social media will look like in this country?
Look, I mean, I do worry about that there's only a few people that are kind of running our tech industries. I do worry about the lack of fact-checking. And again, I mean, I'm a huge believer in free speech, but I don't want to have Zuckerberg's platforms being used to promote Nazi ideology or to get out there and promote conspiracy theories or to promote falsehoods about the LGBTQ plus community or to be a platform to denigrate and berate women. And I don't want our social media platforms, to be basically under the control of one person. I mean, look at X. I mean, Elon Musk is basically kind of controlling the influence and the power of that form. I mean, and using it to back Trump in an unprecedented way. But he wants something. Right? He wants something in return. He wants more of a monopoly, and he wants more money, and that's the price that he's requesting from Trump for his support. And then to ban TikTok, well, what does that mean? Does that advantage the few media platforms that are currently in existence here in the United States? I mean, We need smart regulation, not censorship, and we need to be promoting conversations and information that is not about blowing up our democracy. There has to be a way to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have those kind of conversations in the foreseeable future.
Let's end where we began, which is the end of the Biden administration. Who the heck is trying to call me right now?
Biden.
It's the president. It's the Trump administration. They're already on to us. Have you heard from the Biden administration anything about the pardon of Ethel Rosenberg in these waning days? It's a local story because Robbie Mearpole, Ethel Rosenberg's son, lives in our area. The Rosenberg Fund is based in this area. Any hope that will happen before the president leaves office on Monday?
I hope so. I had a conversation with one of Biden's top aides yesterday about that. He assured me that it's being considered, but there's a process that he's not involved with. But all the right people have the request, and we'll see. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. The idea that we now know for certain that there was no evidence that Ethel Rosenberg was a spy, that in fact we know that from the chief analyst for the National Security Agency that she had nothing to do with any of this stuff, and yet this government executed her. That's a tragedy. And, we can't change the past, but, maybe we could shape the future by acknowledging that this was a terrible, terrible mistake. Well, a deliberate, not even a mistake, a terrible, terrible deliberate action by the United States government should never, ever happen again.
You will be attending the inauguration on Monday. Are you bringing a guest? Is there a seating chart? Do you know who you'll be sitting next to? Anything you're looking forward to, and anything you're dreading about the inauguration?
Yeah. Well, my wife does not want to go, so I will be going stag, and I'll be sitting on the platform where the president and the other presidents will be. It'll be cold. I will be bundled up. I'm going to be wearing my Monty's March 13 Making Moves hat.
Oh, cool.
I left all my winter hat. I'll take a picture and send it to you.
Please.
Look, I'll be honest with you. I'm not looking forward to what Trump has to say. I'm just not. I'm going because I think it's the right thing to do. I criticized Trump when he didn't go for Biden, and I think the American people made a terrible mistake by sending him back to the White House. But, I'm going to do what I think is my duty, and I'll show up and, hopefully I don't throw up, but I will go through it, and then we will get ready for the battles ahead. Biden kind of said it when he ended his speech by basically saying, it's up to us. And people can't give up. People can't get weary. There's so much at stake. If we're not vigilant, he can do a lot of damage. He can undermine our democracy. And so we just have to fight back. So, let's have a nice weekend. But come Monday, the battle begins. And, if there are things that we can agree on, we will work together. The things we disagree on, we're going to have to fight. And we're going to be fighting to protect people's rights. And we're going to be fighting to protect our democracy. And we're going to be fighting to protect programs that help the most vulnerable in this country. I'm ready, and I hope everybody else is too.
U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, the ranking member of the Rules Committee, Congressman Jim McGovern, joins us every week. If you have a question for the Congressman, you can send it our way, thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks so much, Congressman.
All the best.
And now to the heavens.
As interpreted through We Bound to the Earth, as we speak with composer Steve Thomas about Earth Music Theater happening at 33 Holly.
And with someone who's seen firsthand the visuals that music is paired with, astronaut Cady Coleman.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Picture soaking up immersive, high-resolution, astronaut-captured movies taken from the perspective of the International Space Station, of auroras, clouds, oceans, mountains, and deserts from all over the world, paired with live music created in the moment in response to these captivating visuals on screen.
That's the Earth Music Theater Live, multi-sensory, multimedia educational experience designed to evoke thinking and understanding about the Earth and planetary stewardship. Earth Music Theater Live will be presented January 17th and 18th in the Workroom at 33 Holly in Northampton. And sorry for all of you out there, it is sold out.
Yeah. The creator of this work is Steve Thomas, a multifaceted musician and audio creative, engaging in art and education projects that seek to do good in the world. Some of his projects include work with Dr. Sally Edwards and the Persistent and Pervasive podcast series with composer-producer Ruth Mendelson, and for the Jane Goodall Institute, including the unabridged My Life with Chimpanzees audiobook featuring Dr. Jane Goodall in her own voice.
Windows on Earth is the original soundtrack commissioned for use on the International Space Station during Richard Garriott's pioneering flight as a private astronaut in 2008. Garriott's photos comprise a collection of 20 flight paths around Earth. The music is emotionally aligned with the views of Earth from the Sahara and the Himalayas to the Aurora Borealis. Steve Thomas joins us now.
Hey there.
Hello, as does International Space Station resident and our resident astronaut, if we can call her that, Cady Coleman. Cady is a former NASA astronaut and retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force. She flew twice on the Space Shuttle Columbia and spent almost 6 months living and working aboard the International Space Station. Cady is known for her advocacy for inclusion in STEAM fields. She's also a highly regarded media advisor and on-air expert for space exploration news. She'll be featured on the National Public Radio show Science Friday tomorrow. Cady lives in Shelburne Falls with her husband, glass artist, and recent star of the very fabulous 413 Christmas Carol, Josh Simpson. Thank you both for joining us so much.
Those were some intros.
That was. You didn't mention about her patches, though.
Oh, look at all these patches.
It's so cool.
That is so cool.
Cady Coleman is wearing a flight jacket. Is that what that's called?
It's true.
And with patches from the missions that you flew on.
It's true.
The first time I interviewed you at your home,
a long time
ago, it was I think it was the 20th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, and you gave me some of those patches, and they are some of my prized possessions. And you even gave me a sticker from the International Space Station that I gave to my oldest nephew, which he immediately cherished forever and showed off my uncle knows an astronaut. And we won't recount our very first encounter again, which has profanity in it, because I was so overwhelmed and starstruck, quite literally.
You can check that through the fabulous 413 podcast. I do believe we brought it up at other points that Cady has joined us.
I bring it up every single time.
That's very funny. But the patches they remind me of the team. You know, whenever you sort of start losing your way and it's a pain in the butt and things like that, work up there. Having a patch that has everybody's name on it and the Earth.
It's pretty special.
Yep. It's pretty cool.
Now, I was told we have a resident astronomer as well on Mondays, Mr. Universe, Salman Hamid, who is very, very excited about this project and wanted to tell me about it. He'll be coming to it. He secured tickets in time. And then very shortly thereafter, Cady Coleman reached out and said, hey, this is happening. You should have the Steve Thomas on and talk about it. Steve, you live here in the Valley, right?
Northampton.
There we go. And how did you encounter these films from what seems to be a private astronaut on the International Space Station? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, sort of. 3 organizations came together to put this project and then tapped you for it.
Wow. Right. So I'm trying to come up with a short answer to a very long question.
Well, we've got plenty of time, Steve. Don't even worry about it.
Can I give you the piece about the where Richard fits in?
Yes.
Which is Richard Garriott is one of the first people to fly as a private astronaut. And some people say space tourist, but, I mean, they're not just look around. They come to get stuff done, too. And Richard has been, in particular, someone who has really made a bridge between these astronauts who train differently, go for a short amount of time, maybe paid money, maybe not, right? But they've gone to space. And they have things they want to accomplish as well. And he really led the way in that he made a film about his mom. Mm-hmm. He wanted to, and actually...
The fixed photography, too.
Exactly. So, all of us love, including the people who go by another route and now we would refer to as commercial astronauts, maybe.
Yeah.
They all want to bring this home to people. Yeah. And it's hard. And within the government, we don't really exactly have the skills. And so Richard, as a private astronaut, he reached out and he made this thing happen that now is becoming really cool.
All right, so let me try to tie that in. So there's a gentleman, Dan Barstow. He was the project director working at Organization Technical Educational Research Centers in Cambridge. He was kind of behind this project that was tying in a certain software program that was developed to go up with Richard Garriott so that, and you're going to help me with this one, Richard's dad had been up there on Skylab, was it?
Exactly. Richard's dad was an astronaut.
So Richard was now going up, the son of, first civilian son of, to go up. And he was going to take fixed pictures in the same location or relative where Dad had taken it. Mm-hmm. So if imagine you go up in space 20, 30 years beyond, you take pictures of the same location, is it going to be the same?
Right.
Mm.
All right, so that was part of it. And then the commission aspect was to create this audio soundtrack that would go up so that if you were sitting out in the cupola, hanging out, having freeze-dried whatever.
Ice cream is the only astronaut food that I really know about or have eaten.
Or, freeze-dried. So you're looking out, and so each time you might sit in the cupola today versus tomorrow or yesterday, you may be over a different part of the world.
Yeah.
And so the idea then was that this music, which, it's ambient, it's all kinds of stuff, but it's ever-changing, and it's evocative in its own. You tie those two things together, and so what emotions might be elicited in that experience from that perspective? Right?
Every film that you see, if you really think about, sound, the soundtrack, and the way you hear sound in the movie, it actually, changes what you have, for your experience.
Oh, absolutely. I've been loving watching the social media clips of Bruce Lee fighting against Chuck Norris in Rome in one of the most famous Bruce Lee movies, but they changed the music so it looks like it's a romantic scene as opposed to about to be a fight scene because they're taking off their
shirts. It's a wonderful thing that I've constantly been fascinated with. Actually, did my that's what my degree is in. It's in film scoring.
Okay.
I'm curious about this and some of the things that you did with it. Just because. There are some of these. Well, I don't want to get into the weeds
tie it together for you.
The weeds of that, but I know that they're improvisational. But I'm curious about your use of percussion, and then your lack of use of percussion for some of these. It's all really atmospheric, but when you don't have it, there's this extra ethereal element to it, and you're forced to think of the guitar as something more percussive.
Correct.
And then when you do have it, it's kind of grounding in a really interesting way.
I told you would like her.
Yeah, no, I love her. So wait, I got to back us up for a second. So I want to just get this whole chronology.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Because this is coming up a lot.
Again, we're jumping ahead.
Trying to clarify, but we're going to get there. So Dan calls me up. Now, I did this commission, and a part of this thing was I also
did a score. You did the score,
right.
And then played the music.
This soundtrack for the Garriott mission, right? And then also part of that is that they were creating these multimedia exhibits that were going into one went into the Air and Space Museum and the Smithsonian. Another one was at the Monchar Museum. I believe at a time it was at the Museum of Science. And so I did the sound design for that. The clicks, the buzzes, when you're moving the thing around like you're navigating, like you're in a flight suit outside the ISS.
So like a Foley artist as much as a musician.
Well, I don't know about that, but it was fun. But this was all part of it. And so then 2 years ago, Dan and we've been in contact, but he was working with a bunch of all of these wonderful photos. I mean, gazillions of them over many, many flight crews over many, many years. And they were starting to animate some of these things. Some of them are movies, but some of them are stills.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are stills now animated to create this movement, taken with high-definition Nikon cameras.
That's incredible.
It's before we could have film that would show good
Right.
enough. The pictures were so much better resolution.
So then he's like, whoa, let's take the original soundtrack and meld it to this technology with this. And then we came up with this Windows on Earth, the movie, which was the first piece, 48-minute piece, that kind of started this all off. And then he's like, well, what else are you working on? Now we're getting to answer your question. So I'm working on these Guitarscapes thing, and it uses, guitar and a very specific guitar processors, and it has this algorithmic thinking going on in it, and you use an expression pedal to kind of interact with it. And so it's organic, yet it's, an analog/digital effect. I'll play something, and then I'll give it a little bit of activity through the expression pedal, and then it reacts, and it creates other sounds. And then I react with that, and it creates more sounds. So sometimes those sounds are percussive. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're like, how do I control this? And then that was the Guitarscape stuff. And Folk Tales and Fusions is another kind of parallel track, which I think one of the tunes I sent over
Which
to
one?
you to check. Well, the name of the song is called Haze Country, but the piece or the movie it's attached to is, I think it's called Aurora Inspiration.
Uh-huh. So here's a little clip of that.
Oh, yeah. It's country, right?
A little bit. And it's got saxophone in this one, too.
Yeah, this is the great Chris Cheek on alto, who will be joining us this weekend.
Amazing. And so when you are creating these, either for what we've just heard recorded or what we'll experience on Friday and Saturday, if you're lucky enough to have gotten tickets already, because it is sold out at Earth Music Theater live at 33 Holly in Northampton with Steve Thomas and others, will you be creating new soundscapes to these projected images, or will they be based on the ones that you have created before? And yeah, let's answer that question first.
All right. So what we have is basically like a 50-minute movie that Dan has crafted with all of this great footage.
Yeah.
And what I have done is I've spent some time watching, and like, for instance, that piece that we just listened to, Haze Country, will be one of the pieces that we will be playing to live to the Aurora as it evolves in front of us.
And I wish this was a visual medium for this purpose only, because when you...
I know my hands are up in the air like this.
But when you watch the video of the planet Earth with an encroaching aurora...
Isn't it cool?
It is the coolest thing. It's like it's like a slow-moving wave. It's just...
here it's coming back.
Here comes the Aurora music again. But imagine in your head this green cloud-like wave going over, the surface of the Earth. The whole country's worth of it.
So,
it's unbelievable.
I feel like it's the closest that a lot of people will get to synesthesia.
Oh, yeah. I love that. As the idea that you see
that you feel,
sounds
that you see sound.
Seeing
color.
sound, yes, synesthesia.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the whole, well, I'd say, so of the 50 minutes, 49.30 will be like us kind of playing to what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some structure and there's some loose structure, but there's a couple spots that really just came together like 10 days ago. So I'm fortunate enough to bring in some great players. So it's Chris Cheek, world-renowned saxophonist. Carl Clements, another Valley. Everybody pretty much is in the Valley. He's a professor over at Amherst College. Expert saxophonist and flautist. And he's going to be playing heavy Bansuri flute. And
what is heavy Bansuri flute?
Well, meaning it's such a beautiful instrument. And when we look at the visuals, these compelling visuals, it's like flutes or soprano sax or upper, register instruments, I think really kind of resonate with or are more evocative with the whole space thing. And so Bansuri flute being a very, made out of bamboo.
Right.
And it's all about breath and has limited holes, and he plays it really well. It just kind of pairs so well with this ethereal guitar stuff with these visuals, and then...
it's funny that you mentioned that, because there is somebody else who's made the flute famous on the International Space Station, and they happen to also be in the studio. That was Steve Thomas we're talking to. We're also talking with astronaut Cady Coleman, who, again, you played Jethro Tull's famous flute on the International Space Station. When you watch these visuals, and you hear these soundtracks as a musician and as an astronaut. Tell us about how they make you feel.
Well, there's this quote on the Earth Music Theater website that starts it off. It just says, "We hope that humanity will see Earth with new eyes and hear music with new ears."
I love that.
And even I who've already seen these sites individually, and I mean, we all, the Earth is always changing, so it depends when you're up there and even what time of the day or night or whatever you look out. But especially hearing that flute, when I look at the Earth, I mean, the Earth has been there a really long time, and it makes me want to know all the other people who've lived there, not just the people that live there now. I know there's billions, but I want the billions more because we all come from people who come from people, and I think it really builds in that indigenous, and for the U.S. Native American, that sort of, there's just the sounds of ancestors that certainly felt the same way about the Earth as we do.
What an incredible opportunity, though, that we have in this past century and now to be able to see it from this perspective that other people have not been able to. And you think of even the early NASA missions and the pale blue dot and the Earthrise and how important these visuals have been to connecting all of our humanities. And then when you see, like the video we were talking about the aurora cascading over a continent, it feels like it's so close, even though, you're going super fast. How fast are you going on the International Space Station?
17,500 miles an hour.
That's it?
5 or 6 miles a second.
But it makes it seem like, it's the theory of relativity to bring more science into this, how fast you're going and yet how close things are.
And I think, over the years, I mean, you think about the movies or the visuals that we would see, the blurry newspaper photos that are part of video from, the Apollo days. And as we can show more and more detail, and it brings the story to people, but now it's combining not just visual, but also sound. And I think, as astronauts, we really wish we feel very privileged to have had this experience and to be able to then bring it to people in this multi-dimensional way. That's why we've recruited a new set of space explorers, and they are musicians. Right?
I love that.
And we're thinking about radio. Okay, just so you know.
Okay.
I mean, Khalees is already in the club. She has a band, right?
Yeah. I know my way around a drum kit. I can come up with stuff too.
Okay.
Well, let's take a little break right here, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about Earth Music Theater Live, which is coming to 33 Holly in Northampton Friday and Saturday. Sadly, it is sold out, but it will be performed by Steve Thomas from Northampton, amongst others, and we'll continue our conversation with astronaut from Shelburne Falls, Cady Coleman.
You're
next.
listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
That is more of Steve Thomas and his cohort's music. That will be part of Earth Music Theater Live, a multi-sensory, multimedia educational experience this Friday and Saturday at 33 Holly in Northampton. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Northampton-based musician Steve Thomas joins us, as does astronaut Cady Coleman, who lived on the International Space Station where these photos turned into animation have been taken from. And we mentioned jokingly at the beginning of the show that space is a vacuum and that there is no sound there, and that despite what you've seen in Star Wars with explosions and John Williams music, space is still evocative of sound. It wants sound. So
Vapus.
Totally does.
Yeah. I feel like humans want sound. Like we need it to sound like something, because when there's like utter silence, it's terrifying.
Which is what makes 2001: A Space Odyssey such a great movie, because he's one of the only ones that made space so silent, Stanley Kubrick, when you watch those scenes. So then how do you go about the process of figuring out how space sounds? Or Cady?
And I just wanted to say, I think we have to tell people sort of the big picture, which is that we've evolved to, the astronaut, the Association of Space Explorers has been collecting all the videos that we've taken up there and still photos and made them, put them together and recruited musicians to make tracks. And so people played things, they put them together, and you can watch these. And every Friday, a new new movie comes out.
Oh, that's so cool.
But this is really different, what's happening on this weekend, which is we're not listening to some soundtrack. They're playing live. They are watching the video. They've got I'll let Steve do it, but it's an improvisational performance based on what everybody sees.
Go ahead.
And I am a little curious
You're all
about that
excited,
too.
aren't you?
Well, because you have all of these other musical outlets, including improvisational jazz. Like, how much bearing does that have on how you're creating things in the moment for this presentation at 33 Holly, or just in your arranging of this?
Well, I was thinking about what we were talking about before the break, but let me answer what you just said first. You guys are great. So, like the tune that we were just listening to, Hayes Country, right? It's a very simple song, only has 3 chords. And how I put it together is it's not really a country thing. If you listen to the whole song, it kind of winds around. But it's Hayes Country because it was inspired. I live near the meadows, and I walk out into the meadows, and I look up, and there's all this haze that lofts across, Mount Tom, and you can see the Seven Sisters off to where I'm at, and it's Hayes Country. That's what the song's about. But so you take these simple chord structures, things that are easy to wrap around, and then you take people that have a jazz sensibility, like these players that I am, and then what happens on the improvisational side is quite wonderful. So taking a jazz sensibility and applying it to improvisation over simple chord structure, it's different than if you were just kind of meeting it there. So that's what wanted to tie there. The other thing I was going to say about this space thing, right? So some of what I did for the original soundtrack is I created noise. So it's like filtered distortion, and it creates this, what I thought space kind of sounded like, because we know there's no sound in space, but I try to fill that void with that. And so what we've done in the show in a couple spots, and this is getting back to Carl.
Carl Sagan?
No, Carl Clements.
Okay.
So what I've done is I've taken samples from the original sound design that I've created, the space noise, and I'm going to bring that up at a certain point when we're looking at certain visuals, and he's going to do Bansuri flute over that. And it's really, every time it's different. We came up with the idea 10 days ago.
I love it.
And it really is, really something. And then there's another version of that where we actually joined by the acoustic bass and drums. And then it all kind of goes back to just noise, space noise.
Well, and I thought it's kind of combines like this idea of looking out the window and seeing this amazing view. And it's all about Earth, and it's beautiful, and it's kind of like the Bansuri flute, but I'm in a very mechanical place.
Yeah.
And so it's the meeting of those two worlds.
I'm imagining that the layperson who is not an astronaut like Cady Coleman, who joins us, the closest approximation we can have is like looking out the window of a plane, where it's, when you're looking and you're starting to land, it feels like it's a model. You know what I mean? There are little cars moving around.
Well, and when I first got back from the space station, I didn't want to sit next to the window. There's a certain grief in leaving.
Yeah.
Because it's so amazing.
Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering about.
And because it really does, I think you really can. I mean, you're closer and you're wondering what's happening down there, and it gets bigger and bigger, and you can figure as you land.
Yeah.
And you can, see more. But if you're up high, you see,
you see
further.
much further. Like, there's a point in Windows on Earth where the station is going across the U.S. and it hits Boston, and
you let it out.
Well, I mean, I was kind of looking for it, but there was that thrill when I recognized, like, oh, I know exactly where in the coastline
as my
is.
crewmate on my first mission, Al Sacco, said, "Oh my gosh, it looks just like the Earth."
Steve, you must be from
wait,
Boston.
I said it wrong. It looks just like the map.
Boston area. I did grow up around the Boston area.
So did you intentionally choose the Boston images to? I can hear it in your accent.
All right, I try to hide it as best I can.
No.
What was interesting is that I looked at the I looked at the visuals that Dan had put together, and then I was thinking, when I was thinking about which pieces were going to go where, I couldn't quite. I didn't want it to be contrived, so what happened was I just threw songs in there that felt right, and it so happens that there's this whole sequence of going up the East Coast at night. And you end up over Boston. And there's a song that I wrote called Home.
Yeah.
Nice.
Is the song that we're using for that improvisation over that part of the visuals.
When this is projected tomorrow and Saturday.
20 by 40
It's
feet.
huge
Well, it's
at 33 Holly. Yeah, I saw some pictures that you have, Steve, about how it's going to be projected. Have you seen it in this setting yet, Cady Coleman?
Only on Steve's phone.
Oh, okay. But you're going to be there.
I just got back into town.
I'm excited to hear if it brings you closer to your experiences of being on the space station.
That's the bridge thing that we were talking about.
That it really does act like a bridge, not just for me, but for other people to feel like this is what I know, and I see places like I know maybe in Boston, but then how do you connect that with the whole Earth? And it makes a difference that people took these pictures.
And I feel like she's been out there. And how does she come back down here and convey just the magnitude of what she's seen? And when we were talking in the green room, and I showed her the pictures, and I think that was the bridge that I was referring to, because you look at these images plastered up on this wall, and that's as close as I guess I can help you convey to other people what it might sense or feel like in that moment.
And our kids are there's gonna be like sort of mats in the front for kids to sit on.
Yeah,
they're gonna think this is just normal to have this relationship with the Earth, and make that translation.
There's something really special about that.
and I have to plug one thing: no time like the present to affect the future.
I love it. It's called Earth Music Theater Live. It's sold out. It's the 17th and 18th, Friday and Saturday at 33 Holly in Northampton. I hope you'll be doing it in the future somewhere around us.
And no doubt it'll be a little bit different.
Yeah.
There are plans.
There are plans in the future.
Steve Thomas is one of the creators behind Earth Music Theater Live, the chief producer of it. And we have been joined by someone who was live on the International Space Station, our resident astronaut. So great to say it. Cady Coleman from Shelburne Falls. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On the next Fabulous 413, we will learn more about Martin Luther King Jr. Day and its importance in light of the upcoming inauguration with Professor Usman Power Green.
Also, we'll get some mocktails with Zim Jakara from Hope and Olive, and we'll have members of Behold True Believers on for Live Music Friday. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte. Farewell to David Lynch, one of my creative heroes. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.